All right, cool. We're live. So, welcome to another exciting show of the Minority Report, episode 9. It's going to be hosted on my channel, the same channel that does this hour has 56 minutes. I'm joined with my co-host, Alejandro. Dan Mann is not going to be here today. His wife just had a daughter. I hope you all wish him the best. And the Angry Shark, our other co-host, is going to be here later on. But we are joined with a full panel tonight. We got Johnny Benitez. Thanks. How you doing?
What's going on, guys?
We got Kaiser.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Riastrad.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
And I can't see your name. What is it? Third?
Yeah, you could just call me Loki.
It's
Loki
Evola.
Evola.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There we go.
How's it going, guys?
Well, it's going pretty horrible, actually, because I got really blackpilled with this James Field. Not even manslaughter, which I thought he was going to get guilty for, but murder one. As in, like, he was premeditated murder of Heather Heyer, a person he's never met. And I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
Well, it was premeditated the second he set foot in Charlottesville, Virginia. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the argument that the prosecution used, right? His simple presence in Charlottesville was premeditation enough. The fact that he sped up, even though he threw on the brakes there at the last second, means that it was premeditated. He meant to kill Heather Heyer, even though he has no idea what the 4'11", 330-pounder looks like.
I'm going to go ahead and reaffirm the fact that white privilege is not a thing because I wasn't even introduced on this show.
Sorry, James. Yeah.
Shut up, bigot.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Hey,
What's going on, man?
Oh.
You know, it wasn't even when he stepped into Charlottesville. It was when he posted memes. The defense, like the argument the defense made, was based on memes. It was, look at this meme that he posted. And at the time, it was a really popular idea because, like, Black Lives Matter was blocking a bunch of streets. And every fucking boomer cuck I know posted, like, oh, if this ever happened, I'd run them the fuck over. And I remember every fucking Israel-loving boomer cuck posting that shit. And that's what it was based on. It wasn't even like, oh, he came to Charlottesville. It was just he posted this meme. And so the precedent isn't even if you go to an event, you have a premeditated desire to hurt somebody. It's worse than that. It's if you've posted a meme that makes a joke about potential violence or desiring harm or anything of that nature, you are potentially guilty of a thought crime already.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting to is political prisoners. We're going to start getting more political prisoners, and actually letting real criminals out of prison to make room for political prisoners.
Yeah, if you study what happened in Stalin's gulags, like actual rapists and thieves and people who committed real crimes, they actually got really lenient sentences, but political prisoners got insane sentences, like 10 years for nothing, often literally for nothing, just made up accusations that were not even wrong thing. I mean, a lot of people got caught up because they torture people to get them to confess to things and name names. And so, when you're being tortured, if you don't know a thought criminal, you make one up. And so a lot of people just went down that way. So everybody, I mean, every MAGA poster is a potential victim. The first thing they did is they went after the easiest targets, the least sympathetic. They went after Ram because they got the skull masks on and they're scary and they're branded as, neo-Nazis. So every boomer cuck that doesn't know what's coming says, oh, fuck them, like they're Nazis, whatever. And then they start coming for different people who are less easy targets. But by associating them with the scary people, they make it acceptable. And it's going to go all the way down the line. I wish more people would read. I wish they would specifically read about Romanian and Spanish history, because in Spain, this is what happened. You have political prisoners, and then the next thing that comes is they're going to start killing us. The Antifa assassinations or at events, or they're going to hunt people down that are prominent, and they're not going to be prosecuted. That's exactly what happened in Spain, and I expect that to happen from a matter of months to a couple of years, but that's definitely what's coming.
Well, yeah, even the Proud Boys, some of them are facing 20 or 30 years. So, I mean, the media painted them as neo-Nazis as well. I think we need to kill boomerism. I think the Normicon narratives need to die, and we need to replace that.
Let me guys ask you this. Do you guys know the name Bobby Sands?
Yeah, I actually have heard that name. Where's that from?
Bobby Sands was a prisoner during the Troubles in Ireland, and he took up a hunger strike in prison. He died, but before he died, he was elected to Parliament. So what we're facing and what Johnny is saying is we're facing an immediate threat to the degree that will happen eventually that happened in Troubles era Ireland. And out of this, we're going to get martyrs. I'm not an Irish person. I've never been to Ireland, but I know the name Bobby Sands. Right? You know the name Bobby Sands.
Yeah, I did recall that. I'm not too well informed on Irish stuff, but I do remember that name. Yeah, and how what the other thing is, like, how a martyr is built up, these sacrifices that are going to be made and happen. The narrative is a huge part of that. And one thing that kills me and that, like, infuriates me is treason. It's traitors within our movement. I hate traitors infinitely more than I could ever possibly hate the enemy. And we have to remember that when James Fields, when that first happened, he's had no support for virtually this whole year. A lot of people came up with some fucking stupid conspiracy theories because it is the first time that he'd ever been to an event. So they said that it was a false flag and all this stupid shit. And it wasn't really that weird of a situation. A guy was leaving a protest, his car got surrounded, and he got scared and he took off. But people came up with a million conspiracy theories. And so instead of elevating this, instead of using this as fuel to promote action and to promote unity and to get us going, we just made up with a bunch of cuck shit so that we could, well, I didn't, but a lot of people made up some fucking stupid shit so that they could distance themselves from this action or from this person, from this thing that happened. And that's the problem with leaderless movements. Anybody can speak for the movement, and everybody talks, and people, the stupidest ideas come to the forefront. And that's really what angers me. I don't know. Do you guys remember when this happened? All the stupid shit that people said to distance themselves from James Fields?
Oh, I remember Gavin McCain is going on a tirade about how we were never there. We, the Proud Boys, were never there.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, Johnny, is what you're saying about the traitors does that come from what Codreanu said? If I had the bullet, I would let the traitor have it instead of the enemy.
Yeah, well, that quote, which is a good quote, does come from Codreanu, but I think it's natural. I think everybody hates traitors. Everybody is more passionate about someone that they were supposed to trust or that was within their sphere of trust betraying them. I mean, it's just natural to hate that more. And one of the reasons that it's natural is because it's more dangerous. Your enemies aren't as dangerous because you're aware of them and you make precautions and you prepare for conflict with the enemy. But it's when enemies are internal and you don't recognize them, that's what really destroys. I've brought up this a few times before on other shows. When we had activism going on, I had an event right after Charlottesville, and it was protested by thousands of people, and I was slandered by the press, and I've been fired. And there was all of this external pressure. And all of that, I was able to turn into fuel for our movement. No matter what they did, it never really shut us down. It always typically made us stronger, more passionate, more dedicated. It was internal. It was treason that shut down the activism that we had going in Orange County. And it could have only been treason. There's really nothing they couldn't have done that wouldn't have made us stronger and fueled us. But it was treason that destroyed it. And that's what happened with this fucking James Fields thing. It's people that are internal to the movement that had megaphones, that were empowered, that were listened to voices that said some really stupid shit after Charlottesville. And instead of controlling the narrative to make us stronger, to unify us, to to propel us, to get us angry, right? To say, look how we're being oppressed. We need to stand up now and we need to come together. Instead, what they did is they divided us with some fucking super gay optics debate, some super fucking stupid conspiracy theories about James Fields, and they splintered us. And one thing that I would like to happen from this point on, because everything could be different for James Fields if we had mobilized in unity after Charlottesville instead of what happened. One thing that I would want people to remember is who those people were. When your enemies do you the favor of revealing themselves to you, when the traitors make themselves aware, like, you need to not forget that, and you need to not forgive that, because they're going to do it again. And I think we all know, and we don't have to name names, we all know who was fucking making those narratives that really fucked us after Charlottesville.
Yeah. By the way, do you have any thoughts, Loki? Were you back then, in Charlottesville, or did you get familiar with that later on?
Yeah, I was more familiar 2018 on. But I agree. I agree with what Johnny is saying, and I think we need some sort of solidarity network to prevent RAM and C4 from having the same kind of fate. We got to do whatever we can.
Yeah, there should be street activism. The biggest thing is we're all anonymous. Like, I'm not anonymous, but the majority of our movement is anonymous. And there are people that are content producers. And not every content producer is bad, but there are people that are entertainers and they're not activists really at all. And they make money off of this. And so what they do is they encourage people not to do anything but listen to them and listen to podcasts and donate money to podcasts. And they actively encourage people, oh, don't get yourself doxxed. Don't go to events. Everybody who wants to plan something in real life is a fed or trying to fuck your life up. And I want to remind people, we're literally having this debate still. Like, oh, can we have events after Charlottesville? Can we do things? Can we go out in public after Charlottesville? I had an event the fucking week after Charlottesville. And the problem with Charlottesville was planning. Nobody should have gone to Charlottesville. The whole thing with the police standing down, that's a policy. And that policy has existed in Charlottesville for years. A Black Lives Matter protester actually shot another Black Lives Matter protester at an event, and they never changed that policy. So exactly what happened could have been predicted and should have been predicted. And people who are smarter and should know better should have planned against that, And so that's like a big part of the problem is we have this decentralized movement and anybody's allowed to do anything. And everybody, people are put in positions where they really don't belong and they don't have the experience or know how to do things well. And now we've been fucking around for a whole year talking about whether it's possible to do something that I was able to do the week after Charlottesville.
Yeah, and a lot of people criticize the street movement and street action, but we see what's going on in France right now. There's literally a protest movement that's going to take down the government there. And it's, they don't have guns or anything storming the presidential palace.
I have to push back against that, actually. So the Yellow Vest movement is actually not a good thing. It doesn't have any leadership. It's literally just Occupy 2.0, except they're not as committed to nonviolence and non-destructiveness as our movement generally was. But there's no voice. There's no spokesperson. There's no organization. Movements like that are always co-opted and recuperated very easily by the elites. A lot of people weren't activists during Occupy. Some of you guys are too young. Maybe you were in high school or whatever. But when we started, we were a movement against the elite, the banking elite. We weren't explicitly anti-Semitic or anything like that, but we were basically targeting the same people that are still the problem in our movement today. And because it was decentralized and there was no leadership and no official spokesperson, in a very short amount of time, it was recuperated. And all of a sudden, this movement that began about generally being opposed to the elites became about fucking veganism and racial fucking shit and a whole bunch of bullshit. And it was incredibly easy for NGOs with money to achieve that. And so the same fucking thing is going to happen in France. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
So
it could easily happen. You're right. It doesn't really have a leadership, but I do like how people are finally getting up off their asses and doing something. I just wish it would be for 100 or century old churches being knocked down and replaced with mosque and over taxes.
Yeah. Well, you know, people fight over what means a lot to them. A long time ago, when we were a religious society and we cared about our traditions and cultures, an attack on our traditions or cultures would trigger something like this. But the fact that it's only triggered because people are inconvenienced by attack shows you, like, what is it that our society cares about? What is it that our culture cares about? And until you change that culture, nothing else really matters, because that's all people really fucking care about. If they're gonna have a little bit less money to fucking indulge in whatever fucking materialistic thing they're into.
Yeah, it just shows you how horrible a state of the Western civilization is. Just not caring about our traditions, cultures, religion, and caring more about being inconvenienced by this tax. Although it was really that inconvenience, or it is like 3 times as much for gasoline and heating oil in the middle of wintertime. So it's pretty brutal.
Sure, but I mean, if you look at what they're already facing anyway, I mean, the fact that that's the thing, and it's not really the thing. It started a general movement, but like I've seen the memes. There's communists that are wearing yellow vests. There's far right white nationalists. There's like libertarian Bitcoinists. There's everything, and so all this is going to do is people are venting. They're burning up some shit and they're getting angry and they're breaking windows, but they're just venting, and at some point, they're going to realize that they're not achieving much outside of aimless destruction, and they're going to be vented. They're going to be like, when you talk to somebody about your problems, and at the end of it, you don't feel so bad anymore, and you just breathe a sigh, and then it's over. And that's why it's so bad, right? When people are angry, that's a good time to organize. Then you can get people to do things that are productive and have a positive identity and have goals. But if something like this happens where people are just aimlessly mad and breaking shit, they're just going to expend that energy, and it's not going to be used in a productive direction. Hurricanes have a lot of energy, and the waves crashing on the shore have a lot of energy, but that kind of destructive, aimless energy has never built anything good. It doesn't build empires. It doesn't build cathedrals. All it does is destroy and vent. And ultimately, it's going to serve the interests of capital. At the end of the day, this is going to be co-opted. And just like Occupy and just like everything else, it's going to be co-opted because it lacks leadership and direction.
This is why I like having you on. You always have a very good perspective. You have, I could tell you're a well-read person.
Mm-hmm. By the way, also there is this idea coming from Dugin, from Alexander Dugin, the philosopher. He says that it should be the coalition between the true left, the true elements of the left, the true elements of the right, in a joint venture, but against the center. And by the center, they mean the so-called conservatives and the establishment. That's the idea, behind the protests and all that stuff.
And I think that's what you had with Occupy, and you certainly have that with the yellow vest. But I mean, Johnny's absolutely right. When you have no unifying factor other than pissed offedness, then you leave yourself open to be co-opted and corrupted.
Yeah, a lot of these people in yellow vests are actively against each other. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like their beliefs are oppositional. You have communists and white nationalists out there, and so it's just an expenditure. And people don't realize how demoralizing it is, right? Because it's the analogy I like to use is, imagine you're like pioneers and you're out in a valley and there's a forest, and you cut down all the trees to build your civilization. And then you realize that in the process of cutting those trees up, you did it in this disorder, and so you just fucked up all the wood. And now the forest is gone, and because you fucked up the lumber, you don't have the foundation to build up a civilization. What do? You can't work hard to fix that. At that point, you have to wait. You have to wait for years for those saplings to grow into trees that you can now harvest for a productive civilization. And that's what political energy is. That's what public outrage is. People are angry, and then that energy is used, and if it's not used constructively in a way that's sustainable to keep a movement going, it's just fucking wasted, and there's nothing that you can do but wait. And after Occupy, man, like I was a very big part of Occupy, and I walked, I went to all of the different occupations on the West Coast, and it was my fucking life, dude. I lived in a tent for over a year, and I watched the aimlessness of it, and I watched it get co-opted, and I watched people lose interest, and people who were at one point willing to go to jail for their beliefs, they became so demoralized that for the rest of their lives, like I've run into some of these people, they wouldn't lift a fucking finger for anything political anymore, because that period for them is past. And so I want to make sure that whenever that comes again for us, that we don't fucking waste it. And I'm watching what's going on in France right now, and all I can think is like, man, look at all this fucking energy in such a crucial period. We only have a few more of these before it's over, before the whole thing is lost. And if we end up in some disorganized, decentralized bullshit movement, I mean, that might be the last chance. That might be the dying gasp of our people.
Yeah, I think
it all goes back to O'Sullivan's first law in action. Any institution that is not explicitly right-wing will become left-wing over time. That's what happened with Occupy Wall Street, and like you're saying, Johnny, that's what's going to happen with the Yellow Vest riots, unless something changes dramatically right now.
Yeah, someone would have to be charismatic and empowered. And the thing is, most revolutions that succeed or even come close to succeeding are co-opted by the elite, or they stem from the elite. The American Revolution wasn't a populist revolution. It was a revolution between the American elites and the British elites. It's not a coincidence that Simón Bolívar and George Washington and a lot of the people that got independence from Spain and England happened to be fucking Freemasons, you know? If you look at the Declaration of Independence and you compare it to the grievances that we have today, it doesn't really fucking make sense, right? Their grievances are nothing. They're paltry compared to the bullshit that we're dealing with and have dealt with, even immediately after the American Revolution. And so it's elite, right? And the problem is there's not a white elite, really. There's not a race-conscious elite that's going to buy for us, that's going to donate billions of dollars, that's going to help use the levers of power to help us. And so that should be a real concern for people, that we need to be even more dedicated, even more cohesive to succeed, because we don't have the benefit of an elite on our side. We're actually trying to do something that's never been done before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the way...
Actually, it's been done once before. I'm sorry. Haiti. Haiti was the only place where something like that's happened, and look what Haiti's become since. Of course, there's also racial things that go on there, but, you know.
Yeah, by the way, Loki, Riastrad, what do you think about this?
I think we have to destroy the left-right paradigm, and we have to become a movement of the working class, and that's going to be the only way. There's a lot of anger right now in America with the working class, but I don't think they know where to direct their anger to. So I think, if we did a protest of Purdue Farmer or something like that, just showing the people that we stand for what they're concerned about, which is the opioid crisis, that no one's standing up for them right now. We need to become a revolution of the proletariat. The bourgeoisie values, we just need to leave those behind.
Are you, what is your belief system? Are you a Strasserist or?
I would say more National Socialist.
National Socialist, but not like Nazbol?
No.
Okay.
But I just think there's a lot of anger right now with the working class, and they just don't know where to direct their anger. And we need to figure out what's bothering them the most and what Trump is not addressing, and there's a lot of things.
He hasn't addressed shit, really.
Yeah.
Well, people aren't that upset, right? Like very, very poor people on the fringes are very upset. But if you look at the terms as far as like revolutionary fuel and potential, things are still fairly comfortable for a lot of people. A lot of the white people in this country are isolated in fairly white areas where they're not seeing firsthand the problems with multiculturalism.
Well, that's the problem. Is there going to be a breaking point, that the straw that breaks the camel's back, or those people realize that, or do we need to start convincing people on a higher level?
Well, Loki, I mean, we always think we're seeing the straw that breaks the camel's back. When that fucking dude got off after murdering Kate Steinle, we thought, okay, this is it.
There's been a couple of those.
There's been a few, yeah, and then Molly Tibbetts and you know, you name it, and it has
their
never...
own fucking fathers come on and like virtue signal after their daughter was just raped and fucking murdered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the big problem is fucking Trump right now, to be honest, because he's still tweeting like he's doing shit and he's not doing anything, and a lot of people, a lot of whites in particular, still think that he's on the right path. And
well, here's the problem: is like when we elected Trump, only a few of us wanted things like a moratorium on immigration, or were racially conscious. A lot of them like cheerleaded the Republican, right? A lot of these people weren't even pro-Trump in the beginning. So Trump is still technically catering to not his original base, but to a lot of people that voted for him that don't really give a shit as long as the party ticket says Republican and that's who wins. That's all they really care about. If you really want to wake fucking people up, the events I was having at Laguna Beach, I thought were very powerful because, like I said, a lot of these whites that are very supportive of multiculturalism live in very elite places where you have, like, you know, they're made basic and, you know, basically ethno-states by the fact that there's nothing less than $1 million home in anywhere in the area, right? And so when we brought those protests there, and it brought all the ugliness and it brought all the fucking ghetto people to protest us, and thousands of people were there. People don't pay millions of dollars to have that shit down the street. And it starts to create conflict, and it starts making things uncomfortable. And so that's the only way you're going to do it. When they had that protest in Charlottesville, I mean, I know it's a nice area, but it's not really like where the elites live. You need to have events, and you need to bring that to places where the elite actually live, where the people that are donating $1 million to Hillary Clinton live. That's where it's fucking useful to have activism.
By the way, Riastrad, you have been really quiet by now. Do you have anything else to add? Something?
Couple of things, actually. First of all, regarding Conservatard posting, I have a video on my channel that gets more views than any other view, and it's just one of Antifa in Portland harassing old people. And every day I should there's at least like 100 comments, and they're all left by these kind of like edgelords that will do that. If I was there, I would have run them over, and I'm gonna, you know. And it's like, dude, like these people are posting more volatile stuff than anything I've ever seen anybody in the alt-right post. And it's what, why? Like, dude, these people just don't seem to understand the kind of like level at which they're talking at when they start invoking this level of violence. As far as like the left-right paradigm, that's really got to go because it's easier for me to red pill people that are nominal leftists than it is to red pill like people that describe themselves as conservatives. Conservatives always push back against it. I've talked to people. I've been ostracized from friend groups because I've spoken out against like Israel, and this is like a veterans like group of people. It's amazing, like the level of ignorance that people just walk around in, because again, like everyone said it before, people are just comfortable. They're not gonna budge until it's probably too late for them.
Well, I think Tucker is helping with that a little bit, saying that Trump is failing and also preaching some of the economic policies of the left, but we need more of that from him, and we need more of that from people like Ann Coulter as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think our time's getting very limited. You guys know about this act that's in Congress right now? It's called the First Step Act.
Is that the prison reform one?
Earlier.
Yeah, it's the prison reform law. And there's a website, firststepact.org. There's an organization called Forward. It's fwd.us. And if you look at the founders and the funders, are all people with echoes in their name. If you have the coincidence detector, it's like the wealthiest billionaires in the world, Bill Gates. Who's that guy from Amazon? They're all
Bezos.
Yeah. And they're all trying to push this prison reform bill, which is essentially going to cut prison sentences in half for people that have committed certain crimes, sexual crimes like child molestation, rape, aggravated rape, assaults. People who have like multiple felons that are there for life are going to have that reversed. It's just really crazy how something like this might possibly pass, where we're going to have little streets full of violent felons, multiple felons on the streets.
By the way, have you seen these people, the judges and everything, cracking down really hard on dissidents, but not doing shit about the rapists and gang members and all this stuff?
Well, we're going to get it because Kanye went to the White House and he shucked and jived in his red MAGA hat. And that's why we're getting prison reform, because Trump thinks, I cater to this one black guy, the blacks will love me. And unfortunately, that's not going to be the case because they don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about white people issues.
You know who was shilling this, I think, before anyone was talking about the Prison Reform Act 2 was Candis Owens. And we all laughed when she's like, I went to the prisons and I talked to the felons, and I think they're all conservatives, and if we let them vote, they're all going to be conservatives. And like me and a couple other people like laughed at her and like pointed out how fucking stupid and fake and gay like Candis Owens supporters were. And then this thing fucking happened. It's all like super coordinated. It feels like, for her to have said that and for this to be happening. And more and more the criminal justice system is going to be basically just a processing center for thought criminals.
This is what I have to say about Candis Owens. All right, you've heard of taqiyya, right, which is the Muslim ability to lie as long as it serves Islam. She's blackia, right?
Well, you want to know what her deal is too. Years ago, she actually won a race lawsuit. She accused somebody somewhere of racism and won it and got a whole bunch of money. And then she comes out, a couple of years, like last year or whatever, and oh no, I'm a conservative. Like, well,
it's so obvious.
So
she's
yeah,
doing it for
that
money.
black guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys believe in base blacks?
I think Yosef Ozee is about all there is, and then maybe Thomas Sowell.
Fucking Thomas Sowell. I love when people like, not you, because Thomas Sowell, but bring him up. They're like, oh, blacks are conservative too, and they bring up Thomas Sowell and pretend that there's like more than one.
Yeah, I can be one. I mean, I'm half Dominican, half white. That counts, right?
Dominican is a nationality. It's not a race.
Yeah, it's not a race, dude.
Are you?
I mean,
are you mestizo? Are you indigenous? Or are you black? Or are you Afro-Hispanic? What are you?
I guess my mom's Afro-Hispanic, my dad's white.
So you're like a quarter.
He's like an octoroon.
Yeah. I mean, that's not. You're not a base black. Like base black you would have to at least be a mulatto to be like a base black.
Oh, well, I thought it was like the one drop rule applies, right?
No,
the one drop rule is, yeah, that's fucking
not in America, dude.
No, but my whole thing is this. I do think that there can be base blacks, but I think we should have a strict criteria. I know I do. I have standards for who's my enemy and who's my ally. I don't just go off my feelings like a lot of people do. And in order for a base black to be a base black, for one, they have to be black. Not like those people that are like, my great-great-grandfather was sat next to a black guy on a bus one day. But like actually be black. And then they have to be supportive of identity politics and white identity. They have to not see white identity as an inherently threatening thing. And then they have to recognize, and this is the important one, Jewish supremacy is a common enemy. Because that's like the only use of base blacks. But if they have those things, then they can be base minorities. But they have to have those two qualities. What do you guys think about that?
So I guess Brittany Venti's not a base black person either.
I would say screwy. I would say screwy Louis Farrakhan is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say Nation of Islam is the only group that meets that criteria right now.
Well, no, they used to. They don't anymore. I think Farrakhan is pretty anti-white.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
I've seen some anti-white messaging on his part, but it's not so extreme compared to anti-Termitic speech.
Yeah, well, that's why he's valuable, right? And the reason that like Farrakhan, who's You know, he's actually one of the most powerful anti-Semites in our country today. He actually has the ability to preach his message respectably. He lives well. He's generally, like, they try to attack him, but because he's black, he's immunized a lot, quite a bit. And he's got, like, resources and people to speak out to that are considered normal. You know, if you go, like, even if you're, like, whoever you are, if you're like, I listen to Farrakhan and I think his ideas are good, you don't get fired from your job for that, despite that being anti-Semitism.
Our last president hung out with the dude. Come on.
Yeah. But here's and here's why I think unity and not unity in like I want to integrate, but why like cooperation against a common enemy would be so useful is because this is what they do. If white people speak out against Jewish supremacy, they're generally crushed. Like the system is extremely hostile and tries to shut us down. With black people, they just kind of ignore them. Like for the things that like when Farrakhan says something really extreme, like calling Jewish people termites, and you know that level of dehumanization, that gets a little bit of attention, but not that big of a deal. If Richard Spencer called someone a termite, it would be like 10 times bigger. And so they just kind of ignore people like Farrakhan. But if there was cooperation against a common enemy, it'd be very hard because they wouldn't really be able to crush it, or they wouldn't want to. They'd have to think about it because now they'd have to crush and oppose and try to destroy a group that they've tried not to do that to. What is that?
I think it's because they're not really scared of Farrakhan and blacks. I mean, they're not really smart enough to actually pose a threat to them.
Oof, you said it, not me.
Well, I'll say this: if you look at the original struggle, there was a threat there. It wasn't always certain that the Jews and MLK were going to win. For a long time, Stokely Carmichael and people like Marcus Garvey had the reins of their movement. So they're sort of a defeated enemy, but that's exactly the kind of thing that could be a threat, is some kind of cooperation against that common enemy. But again, base blacks would have to meet that criteria of not seeing whiteness as an inherent threat and understanding a common enemy and wanting to preserve themselves. Because there's a lot, you know, when I hear black people talking about how you shouldn't, you know, race mix because they want to keep their blackness, that's good. That's a positive thing. We shouldn't be offended by that, and we should want blacks not to be offended when we obviously don't want people to race mix so that we can preserve our heritage. And so,
I think what we also need is international solidarity. You know, one of the things that's happening right now is Trump's Zionism is pushing a lot of the Arab countries together, and there's kind of a pan-Arabism against the common enemy there. And I think Nazbah is the way to go.
Yeah. By the way, I gotta drop my white pills on that. It's not just in the Middle East. It's not just in Europe. It's not just in North America. Here in South America as well, they have been manipulating and and doing all this puppeteering stuff within Colombia, within Argentina, within my country, within Brazil, within Chile. Like everyone knows by now that they want Patagonia because they want access to the Antarctic, to the Antarctic continent, and also they want access to our resources and our shekels and basically anything else. So yeah, we are pretty much against the Zio power as well. So it's going to be the end game for them.
Yeah, I mean, Hitler had it right. Unite all of us against the common enemy.
Yeah. So you know what's an interesting thing about that what you mentioned in South America is this thing where I don't like communist guerrillas, but the communist guerrillas, I think, were more of a force against, you know, that kind of Jewish supremacy that exists in the United States than, unfortunately, like people like Bolsonaro, whose kids walk around in Mossad fucking t-shirts and who fucking fillets Israel, and Trump, who's like a nationalist, quote unquote, and then does all this shit. A lot of these people that people are getting really excited about because they say some edgy shit are actually worse. Because, you know, they're for one, subverting our movements, and two, because they are openly and explosively fucking pro-Israel and pro-Jewish power, like Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Well, I think they just think they keep fooling boomers long enough until we can't pose a threat anymore.
Yeah.
By the way, talking about that, they use their proxies against national powers. For example, back then it was communist guerrillas because Israel did had a hand in in all this because they were interested in the money that came from the drug trade. They were interested in investing in this kind of stuff. So that's what they do. They buy things because of their overwhelmingly really big amounts of money. They are able to buy stuff, to buy people, to buy things that go on. And what happened as well with that is that, for example, they buy politicians, judges, and everything else uh, via their proxy, which is Freemasonry down here. Freemasonry in Argentina, in my country, in every other country down here. They are tied to the Jewish Freemasonry stuff, which is the B'nai Brit. The B'nai Brit is not an organization just to silence people. It's actually to manipulate and co-opt other places via Freemasonry, and they have been sending threats to. In Chile, they have been sending threats to the social patriots. In Argentina, they have been sending threats to those that still bear the torch of Juan Domingo Perón. In Brazil, they have been trying to do something with the Islamic population because they are based. They know about this stuff that goes on. And in my country, they have been sending threats to my boss, to the other three that are the higher commands of my movement. And about me, they haven't sent shit or anything, but they are keeping an eye on me. I am aware of that.
How is I was gonna ask. I'm actually not too aware. Is Ivan? What's his name? The guy that just got elected in Colombia, Ivan Duque or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is he? What's his? How's he on Israel and that whole problem? I'm not actually currently aware.
The problem is not Israel in that case. He's because Israel has always been present in a lot of things within Colombia. That's why they are so awakened about anything uh, done to them. But he's like the BFF, to so to speak, the BFF to George Soros. That's the main problem.
Oh, he is.
Yep.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's fuck. I remember when everyone was excited because they were afraid that the communists was gonna win, and like my family and a lot of people were worried because they had lands and they didn't want their lands to be taken by the state. And fuck, man, BFFs with George Soros, huh? Shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no, I do have faith in the Colombia movement. They have understood the threat. So some commies are actually coming to their own senses. They understand that there is a bigger picture, there is a bigger enemy, an external enemy, and they would rather deal with the external enemy than to kill each other. They have came to
What
understand that.
What is the Colombian movement?
Uh,
Like, for example, if I wanted to know, well, who should I be looking at, or like, I guess looking at the internet for? What is the group name or whatever it is?
National Vanguard,
National Vanguard. Okay, that's interesting.
Vanguardia Nacional. Yep.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we also have came to our conclusion that we should be starting to talk together to maybe arrange like our version of the first international on the Forum of Sao Paulo. The commies did that, but we are going to do that under the idea of through nationalism and pan South Americanism, if you will.
Yeah, that sounds like a good. I mean, that's part of the thing that's important is there has to be a united front. There's not a single group of people that can oppose Jewish power on their own, and I think white people need to really realize that that's not going to happen. And there has to be some kind of cooperation, and that doesn't mean integralism, that doesn't mean integration, that doesn't mean any of those things. But if we really want to win, and we don't want to just say edgy things on the internet, which is the people that countersignal these ideas, they typically just say really edgy things in Fed posts, but they're not activists and they're not really involved in anything, and they're just venting on the internet, and so they want to say the most extreme thing, and that's obviously not cooperation, but there has to be a united front, because Jewish supremacy is a global problem that threatens all peoples, and no people individually have the resources or power to defeat them. I mean, historically, certainly not Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, solidarity around anti-Zionist forces around the world is a good thing. I think Stryker has a great idea. You know, I don't know how exactly we're going to cooperate with people like Iran and North Korea without being thrown in jail for like treason, but I'm sure we can figure out a way.
Yeah, you get.
Well, we need to start. Are you guys in North America, any of you, or is this mostly a show from people outside of the country?
I'm in the United States.
Everyone.
Yeah, I'm in the United States too.
I am the only.
So
I am the only one. Yeah, I am the only one.
Oh, okay. So I would say within our own country, like, we have to be able to have a cohesive movement that has the power to work with other groups like Farrakhan's group that view, you know, Jewish power as a threat. And that coalition, I mean, we don't have to worry about the world. Let's worry about our own neighborhood. Let's worry about, like, waking up the people around us to this problem and to being able to work, right? Because I understand that people are upset. I understand that people look at, like, you know, the homicide rates and how many blacks kill whites and the FBI statistics, and that makes them very angry, understandably, because it's an egregious crime, and it makes us want to fight blacks. But ultimately, I think the biggest threat and the biggest problem, and the reason that there's, you know, racial conflict between whites and blacks, is because of a system that was created that's always been about Jewish power. The black nationalist movement would have never created this system. It was always separationist, and it was always meant to conserve black people and to get black power for black people, but not to force them to be in communities and in spaces with white people. And so, in my opinion, that's like a really crucial thing, and a lot of people don't believe that it can happen. But I don't believe that, you know, we're really going to achieve anything in this very minute, period spiraling movement.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I do have a suggestion about that, because you are also one of the top guys, and here we have the new blood with Riastrad and with Loki and James and all the others. Is that, for example, take this cultural revolution thing from Iran as an experience, but secondly, how do this work? They have the 12 elderlies, the Ayatollah. There are 12 Ayatollahs, and there is one that is the leader. But if the leader should die or whatever, any one of them can pick up the mantle and continue on. But there must be like 12 people that are up there. For example, in my opinion, you can have Stryker, Spencer, Patrick Casey, the guy from Patriot Front.
I have to counter signal Patrick Casey super hard. Sorry.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
Agree.
And everybody else you mentioned, I generally like, but Patrick Casey, I view as like a traitor.
Really?
You know, I worked for Greenpeace. Yeah, I worked for Greenpeace for a long time, and you know, I was like one of their best canvassers, and I saw that organization. I'm like, that's why I like the eco-fascist. I'm actually very environmentally minded.
Uh-huh.
But you know what I started to recognize is Greenpeace's mission is to provide, like, to get money for Greenpeace. They don't actually do anything. If you like actually study what Greenpeace does and their involvement, they do nothing. They do publicity stunts, and they do things where, like, you know, some small organization has been fighting for something for like years, and then at the very end of that battle, Greenpeace will come and they'll put their banner on it and they'll get all the credit and they'll do a bunch of fundraising off of it. And that's essentially
it's
what
the G. Komen Foundation of Environmentalism.
Yeah, and so, you know, IE as an organization, I'm sorry, like it's just absolutely fucking garbage at this point. I was really supportive of any group for a long time, but I really view them as threatening, because what they're doing is trying to they're trying to be as marketable as possible to raise money. Like I can already see that. Like what they're doing is trying to be the biggest fundraiser as far as our movements go, and that's going to drain a ton of money out of our movement, and a ton of money's already been drained out of our movement. So like I have to you know, like counter signal that pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And as far as your statement about like these leaders, like here's the reality: we're not leaders. We're like loud voices. Leadership and a movement, I would want people to stop thinking about that. We're not in a movement. When I think about a movement, I think about an organization that has stated goals, hierarchy, and a plan of action. We're just people that have similar ideas. and similar desires, right? And the problem with that is that if we don't have a movement that has hierarchy and has actual leaders and an actual membership and actual goals and a plan of action to attain those goals, then we're not doing anything. And people should really think about the fact that like our movement hasn't, or our, you know, pseudo movement, what people call a movement, has only produced two so far, really, the TWP, which fell, and Patriot Front. And I don't consider IE like a real movement as much as I consider it like a fundraising operation. But that's like the real issue. So Spencer, or, you know, these people, like, they need to come together. I mean, it would be very powerful if you could imagine like being able for those people to be able to put aside differences and to create a hierarchy and to choose a leader and to combine their platforms and power. Like, we could be doing very big things for our political prisoners right now. But instead, it's all very fragmented, and we're all kind of just entertainers. There's a bunch of podcasts, and we're just entertaining people. But there's not the movement building that I think should be happening at all.
I nominate Walrus Aurelius for Supreme Emperor God Emperor of the Walrus Aurelius.
Well, I think we really need is Spencer, Stryker, and guys like Johnny to come together and lead us. I don't know how else to put it.
I mean, here's the thing. You've got to make sure that a leader is somebody that kind of doesn't want it. You want a reluctant leader, because I'm sure Johnny remembers when old Base Stick Man came on board and got foisted upon the Proud Boys by old Gavin McCain, and that just fucking destroyed shit.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I mean, that's part of why we don't have leaders. I can tell Spencer doesn't really want to be a leader. Stryker is a personality on shows. He's not a leader. And, like, you know, people get it. If you start organizing, even on a small level, like, I could have a big-ass show on YouTube, and I could influence millions of people, and they probably wouldn't do that much. But the second that you get even 6 guys out into the real world doing anything, no, like, totally, I'm talking about legal shit too, just like standing, like doing a flash mob. Like, they know who you are, and action starts to build. People start to build up portfolios on you, and shit starts to happen, and shit starts to get scary. So anybody that knows what it is to be a leader on any level, like, doesn't really want to do it. So as far as reluctant leaders, I'm pretty sure all of the people that you just named, including myself, are reluctant. But I mean, we have to. I mean, I after the whole Base Stickman thing, I stepped away for a whole year, and I just watched. And I just saw, because since the very beginning, my whole desire was just to be ancillary, to help. But there's nothing that seems to be happening, is there?
Well, it seems like recently we're getting a lot of Gen Z coming our way. I'm curious what you think, Johnny, about campus activism.
I think the problem with campus activism is that young people have this notion that they don't want to learn from history, and that's not even young people. That's everybody. For me, there's 3 books that govern my life. First of all, the Bible, but for our movement purposes, Mein Kampf and For My Legionaries. And those books are big, and every page of them is useful. There's so much history and tactics, and it helps you understand, right? Because we don't have the time to learn from our mistakes. If we fuck this up, we don't get another chance for years, if we get another chance at all. So we can't learn from our mistakes. We have to learn from history. And a lot of, like, young people that get involved in activism, they want to do things before they want to learn things. And they don't want to listen to people, and they don't want to be led by an older generation. And so, you know, right now, I'm hearing people that claim to be fascist, like, trying to push decentralized movements, like trying to get us to do our generation's version of Occupy, like racist Occupy. And they won't listen when you try to explain, you know, and I was there. I watched everything, and I've read, you know, trying to explain to these people why that's such a failure and why that's so dangerous, and they don't really listen. And so that's my only concern with, like, the younger generation, is, like, their energy and their passion is necessary to fuel a movement, but, you know, every generation of young people, is rebellious, and this one,
That
and from Culture New
to touch on, if I may, on campus activism, this is the most polarized generation we've ever seen. And so you can do campus activism, but you post sign with something as innocuous as "it's okay to be white," and immediately it's decried as racist and white supremacist, even though you're simply saying it's okay to be white.
Yeah, but that was brings so many people to our side. They see a sign with a blank piece of paper, well, plain white piece of paper with just "it's okay to be white" and people freaking out about it. That gets so many people sympathetic to us.
Did it?
It did, yeah. I remember it's okay to be white. Like woke a lot of people up. I remember a lot of civic nationalists like really going like, "Wow, they really fucking hate us for being white." So I think it's okay to be white was a successful movement. And the thing about it is, you know, part of the reason everyone's so scared is because all the power that the left has, when one person uses their real name or gets caught doing something like that, all that power is focused on that one person. And that's really fucking scary because they make an example out of that one person. If more people were stepping up, if more people were doing more things and speaking openly, like it'd be hard. Because once you start striking down a bunch of people, I mean, you can only bring all that force to bear on a handful of people, and then eventually more people, you know, because there's in any crowd safety, start to speak up, and then there's this catalyst, and then that repression actually starts to work against them and starts to build solidarity and anger and motivation within our ranks. But I mean that's going to have to happen at some point, and nobody wants to hear that. No one wants to hear like, hey, you know. You got to start stepping up. You got to start making sacrifices. You have to start thinking about yourself as an activist and a revolutionary. But you know, I've seen it before. I saw the leftists do it in Occupy. I saw like vegans with dreadlocks, incredibly fucking weak-looking men, and they still fucking stood their ground, man. They stood their ground when they got tear gassed. I saw them shot at with fucking rubber bullets. And if those guys who were so fucking weak and like soyed the fuck out can stand up to that, like we should be able to do so as well.
No, man, and I hate to bring up Polniak because he's such a weird commie, but I mean, people haven't been in a fight. You need to get into a fight. Look, once you get into one fight, you're no longer afraid to get into others. It doesn't hurt that bad.
Well, people aren't.
We were built to fight. We were built for it. Men were built for it. That's why we have denser bone. We evolved for it.
Yeah, but it's not the physical fight. I don't think our guys are afraid of that. Our guys are afraid of like being ostracized because we only exist on the internet, and then people get off the internet and they have their normal lives, and there's like a ton of us that just live with this secret, you know, like how gay people used to have to live in the closet. Like we're like closet fucking nationalists, right? And like we won't even put a fucking MAGA sticker on our car.
What a sad world we live in. Gay people can live out in the open while normal people have to hide in the closet.
Yeah, you can literally go, like, people will parade down the street in, like, a rainbow thong, deep-throating a fucking dildo. But, like, you can't say that you love your people. You know what I mean?
Can't even say you love your family.
Here's the thing. You can be a pedophile, right? You can come out on salon.com and say, oh, I'm a non-offending pedophile. And that's somehow not as bad as being well, he's a racist. Racist is worse than being a pedophile in this country. Let that fucking sink in.
And he even had that one lady making that TED talk in this weird monotone voice about defending pedophilia.
Yeah, I remember that. By the way, I do feel like, for example, talking about the experience down here is that we understood that action is not really just action that is needed. It needs a movement needs to cultivate also the intellectual side, the doctrinal side, and all that stuff. So in the case down here in my country, we have two movements. One is intellectual, and the other one is more streetwise action. But those two are in sync. We are the same. We are the very same overall movement. In Brazil, something similar happens as well in Colombia, as well in Argentina, as well in Chile. We understand that we need those two things because there are people that are going to come with intellectual arguments and all that stuff, you know, and you need to have a strong ideology, a strong political doctrine that came from you and came from your own history, your own identity, your own tradition. But it's strong enough to hold all these all this criticism, all this stuff, and also it reflects on the strict activism. That's what I want to say.
Well, I think everybody needs to have a fever dream. That way they can argue with themselves over their own doctrine, because that's what happened to me.
I would say, one thing that's really interesting to learn from that was valuable, and actually, funnily enough, probably the best example for what a movement should look like is the Black Panthers. And I say that because their racism was positive. For the most part, I mean, I would say about 60 to 70% of what the Black Panthers did was like social programs for people in their neighborhood. And even if white people did that, it's very hard to be like, oh, look how racist they are if you're providing goods and services to your people. And that's a big thing. People have to realize there's a short pool of people that can be motivated by negative racism that's like anti other races. And so if you really want to gain momentum and good public image, you have to have social programs, but also, and more to the point, the Black Panthers, for all the stuff that people say about Black low IQ, they had like reading, they had material that they had to understand. They had to read Mao's Little Red Book, and they had to understand it, and they had to be ideologically in sync. And that's like one of my things is like, if I was going to have a movement, I would want everybody who's a part of it, who's a member, to think of themselves as a soldier and do everything every day that they could to prepare themselves. And that would be having a working knowledge and understanding of For My Legionaries and of Mein Kampf, and to physically train, to have a physical discipline that strengthens the will. And so I think those two things are key. And so like whoever's listening to this, and maybe even you guys on the panel, like if you wake up and you go a day where you didn't do those things, or you don't have a good knowledge of Mein Kampf or For My Legionaries, like I think you need to ask yourself why, and then make yourself do that and become that person, because that knowledge is crucial to our movement.
Also, I would suggest rules for radicals.
I would say this. There's like a million books.
It's not only for knowledge of how our opposition works.
Yeah. I guess like there's a lot of good books to read, and there's like a wealth of literature. I would say those two are like doctrine. Like you need to have those books. Rules for Radicals would be useful. I mean, it is useful, I guess, to understand, but it's not essential. I would say those two books are essential to the struggle. And then there's a lot of other good stuff like Solowinski, you're right.
Yeah.
I think...
Mm-hmm. Go, Loki.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think Casa Pound in Italy is giving us a good model in terms of caring for our people and providing social services and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just Casa Pound, it's as well Hogar Social Madrid from Spain. They are also doing that. They have sister organizations. All of them are the very same organization, and we pick up the model. We are going to do some stuff here. But what I was saying is that they themselves are developing their own doctrine, and I am seeing that Patriot Front is going to do the same, and that's what I was getting at,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's something that came from you on this specific time and era for you, not for Romanians, not for Russians, not for Germans, not for you in North America, whites in North America. That's the most important, one of the most important things,
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing about making a movement like that in North America, specifically the United States, is the massive diversity that we have. And it's not really concentrated anywhere. It's pretty spread out. Like, and a lot of countries, they'll have like Yugoslavia, for example, they'll have a lot of Bosnians concentrated in one area, a lot of Serbs concentrated in another area, while we have like blacks in literally every part of the country, even Alaska.
Not really. I mean, I've looked at demographic maps. It seems that for the most part, people are pretty condensed into areas. Like, I know there's blacks in a lot of states, but like the majority of blacks all exist within a few pockets of urban centers and some places in the South, I think.
Yeah, but Atlanta, Birmingham, Mobile.
Yeah, I mean,
Mississippi's the blackest state, right?
I think it's Mississippi.
I thought it was Georgia, or one of those. Yeah, I thought it was Georgia, but I don't know.
I used to live in Mississippi. Let me tell you, even in rural areas, you're a minority if you're white.
Yeah, the Black Belt is what they call it, right? In Mississippi, where it's like majority black in the rural areas.
But I mean, at the same,
around Jackson.
Oh, I'm talking even north of Jackson, man. Any rural area in Mississippi, aside from, I mean, other than Biloxi, anywhere in Mississippi, if you're white, you're a minority.
I actually used to live near Biloxi in Ocean Springs. There was still a sizable black contingent there, but most of the people there were actually French or, French ancestry.
Haitian, Creole.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I wouldn't call Haitians French. They don't even speak the language. They speak bastardized version.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. Pretty soon France is going to be blacker than Haiti, probably. Yeah, but anyway, that's what I was, I wonder how many people, when you see these anonymous profiles online, how many are actively working to be naturalists? How many are going to the gym or doing fitness, and how many of are reading, and how many of them are just watching these podcasts and kind of entertaining themselves? Because I think one of the biggest things that we should protect ourselves from is becoming a shallow, superficial movement like the skinhead movement, where we pick fashion choices and we pick these certain aesthetics, and then that's what it becomes, and we lose any possibility of being an actual movement because people come in that just want to turn it into a subculture. I would say that's probably one of the bigger threats that we're facing too. As the longer this goes on without turning into a movement, the closer it is to becoming a vain and shallow and superficial subculture of edgy people. And the reason that there's such a big threat is because, some of these edgy people, they don't want this movement to be mainstream. They don't want to win. They want to be edgy. Whatever the edgy thing was, that's what they were going to be in the generation they were born. And it is unfortunately true that we are the edgy thing, that our common sense values are the thing that's on the fringe. And the movement really should protect itself from that kind of thought and those kinds of people that want to marginalize us so that they can be like Nazi hipsters.
Well, I mean, it's like what Paul Joseph Watson and even Gavin has said, conservatism is the new punk. Insert right-wing nationalism for conservatism, and there you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. At least the skinheads had cool rock concerts, nice clothing, would go out in the streets and kick Antifa butt. We just sitting on the internet.
They got movies about them, right? Romper Stomper, American History X.
Yes, Jewish movies. Exactly what we don't want to do is emulate Jewish movies.
This means? It means not welcome.
And I don't go out of my way to look like that guy. It's just an unfortunate.
I wasn't insinuating that you look like Eric Vineyard at all.
When this whole thing started, that's the thing that come up all the time. But I can't grow a beard on the sides, and I'm bald, so and then people even said that I sound like the guy, which I don't think is true. But
no, you don't.
I guess that's how we know you're white, right? Because you look like him.
That's what they said. Yeah, not just people say I look like every bald guy, but I don't know.
If it makes you
but we don't want to be that guy, because my main thing is that I'm saying we don't want to be cartoon Nazis that turn into what it means to be a fascist is that you wear these fucking boots and you're an asshole. Yeah. It should be what it means is that I take fitness seriously, that I'm well read on nationalist subjects, and that I love and fight for my people. That's what being a fascist means, or a national socialist, or all that. We don't want it to be we wear these fashion things and we're edgy faggots like that. That's what we want to move away from.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone's trying to break into your car.
No, it's
I'm outside in the backyard.
By the way, yeah, I do agree with that. For example, there is this guy from Spain, Pedro Varela. He's always saying that he's more on the National Socialist spiritual side of things. He's always saying that people should have a brotherhood. They should go to camping together to know each other, to understand nature, to understand the greatness that it is Spain for them. In order for them to understand what Spain actually is, and because after they understand that and they understand themselves, they are going to be able to do something about that, because they will feel completely tied up to the land.
Yeah, I agree. It's not healthy to be living two separate lives, and I think that if like working out, or you have some buddies that you do that with, that become friends with them and like normie things, or whatever it takes, build actual friendships, and then at some point you try to make the push.
Look, and I think Johnny and I would both agree on this. Look, you need to improve yourself, and that's both mentally and physically. So read books, not fucking comic books. Read actual nonfiction books about political stuff, right?
Read Mein Kampf specifically.
Evola. Read, right?
Read Siege.
Don't read. Don't read.
And I'd say, you know what's an interesting concept that I like to introduce too is like when you're young, you tend to read a lot, and I did that, where I would just read a shitload of books, and no matter how good you are, and some people are better and some people are worse with retention, the amount that you retain if you read a lot is not that much, right? Like you retain some essential things from every book. Mm-hmm. But once you get to be around 30, you should have read enough to understand what's really important. And you should always consume new literature a little bit. But at my point, I now just study books. Like I have a few books that I think are very important, and I study them. And that's kind of why like they do Bible study. You know, it's like they read that same book over and over again to get everything out of it that they're supposed to, especially with something as big and complex as that. And Mein Kampf and For My Legionaries are like that. Those books are not books that I have read. Those are books that I continue to study, that I reference, that I quote people, or that I use in quotes when I'm talking to people in debates and in conversations. Mm-hmm. And I would think that, you know, if you're at this age, or really if you're a nationalist, those are things that I want to like clarify. Like I don't want people to read those books. I want people to study them. Mm-hmm. You know.
Yeah. By the way, for example, for me, I would suggest reading Guillaume Fay from he's European. He's from France. Yeah, Guillaume Fay, Alain de Benoit, and also Dugin. Yeah, those three. And if you can put your hands on a book by Leon Degrelle, or maybe Horia Sima, which would be the second leader of the Iron Guard, that should be enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm getting through Mein Kampf right now myself, and I agree it's a lot to digest, and I'm probably gonna have to reread it for sure.
I actually read.
There are parts of it that are more important too.
Yeah.
Definitely. I actually was doing both the reading and the listening of the audiobook of Mein Kampf, and I would read a part of it, and then I would just listen to that same chapter at the gym, of all places. And they say like when you're actually like more physically active in that time, your brain is also a lot more receptive to like information. I got through that pretty fast too.
Who's the audiobook read by?
I don't know who it was. It was a British. I got it off of a SoulSeek, but it was a British narrator, and it was there was also a female voice that would posit like little factoids throughout the book.
Here I was. For some reason, got the hilarious concept of like I was just listening to the Alvin and the Chipmunks like Christmas music, and like how funny would it be if they just read Mein Kampf, and that's how like you ingested it.
Dude, that would be funny. But I was thinking William Luther Pierce.
Oh, William Pierce is good. He's not perfect.
Only the Jew knew that by an able and persistent use of propaganda.
That's
a very good impression.
Yeah,
that is a good William Pierce. I think that's the best William Pierce I've heard. I haven't heard too many, but I think that's even better than the one they did on Murdoch.
Mm-hmm. He wasn't easy on the comedy, though. He was always serious during his announcements podcast.
Yeah.
It is important for people to take it seriously, though. You know, like I get that we're a culture of memeing, but like once we have a serious leader, one thing that you realize is that person is not constantly in communication. We don't want constant access to our like head leader, whoever that person comes to be. Like you don't want to do that too much. You want that person to be, you know, kind of revered and special in a way, like put away for the most part. Mm-hmm. So I understand him doing that, and I understand when people who are leaders do that.
Yeah, but I would have to disagree on the just one leader, because look what happened with after George Lincoln Roosevelt died. The next one that would pick up the mantle was Luther Pierce, and after he died, everything collapsed. No, you need a squadron or a group of leaders,
Yeah, absolutely. Learn from history. Look at what happened when Muhammad died.
Uh-huh.
No, you think I'm joking. You think I'm joking, but I'm dead serious. I mean, you look at when Muhammad died, and then you have
that's a problem of succession. Here's my contention: a leader will lead regardless. And if there had been a leader to take George Lincoln Rockwell's place or to take William Pierce's place, then that person would have been there, right? They just weren't. So the problem is of succession, but you don't want to like diffract power. You don't want to create power struggles. I believe very much in the leadership principle that is as is outlined in Mein Kampf, and you really don't want to have that. I mean, one of the beliefs that I have is that you have to limit wealth, right? And I don't mean like limiting it very low. I don't mean like people should only be able to have $100,000, but the existence of billionaires creates people who have enough money to use that money as a weapon, and it rivals state power, and it creates conflict. Whenever there's a power struggle, there's conflict, and that's why bureaucracy is so bad, right? Every like 2 or 4 years, like these senators and these congressmen are constantly worrying about getting money, and it makes them vulnerable. So they have to do what people with money tell them to, and there's only a handful of people with that much money, and we know who they are. And so that's what creates this instability and the ability to recuperate bureaucratic government so easily, and representative government so easily. So I believe purely in leadership principle. I think the problem that you're outlining is a problem of succession, not necessarily a problem of one person having too much power. And the reason, and there's a really great Mein Kampf quote for that I'm actually gonna let someone else talk and try to find that for you guys. But it's basically this: there's not that many great people, and when you have a great leader and you diffract power and you make them struggle against their own fucking like whatever it is, whoever that you've made them accountable to, you're generally taking away from the movement and making it more vulnerable. And that's actually what happened to Hitler. And at one point, like the people that were co-leaders with Hitler, they actually tried to like put roadblocks in his way. They tried to fucking make things difficult for him. And Hitler really did more with the movement when he threatened to leave. He said, I either get executive complete authority as like leader, or I leave completely. And at that point, you know, their movement hadn't achieved anything without Hitler. Everything they'd been able to do was dependent on Hitler's oratory and his work. And so they had to give him that complete power. And that's when that movement really took off. And so I see that, and I see that constantly, and I see that in my experience organizing. And I think that's just key. I really don't believe in diffusing power that way. But anyway, I'll let someone else continue. I want to find this quote.
Yeah, because to me, it's actually that's the problem of individualism, and that's liberalism. That's the main problem. You know, everyone wants to see for their own gain, for their own goal, and people need to. The ones that are leaders need to understand that they are not eating for themselves. They actually, in truth, they don't matter. What matters is the fight, the goal, and the mission. That's what matters, you know. That's I actually take that from what you're saying that people in the movement should be soldiers, and the ones on top should be generals. But like the SS, when the SS got to fight, the generals went to fight with them, and they always that's why these people were really held at as high as they were, as high as they were, yeah, because they would be within their own people, you know. They know that they are above them, but they at the same time understand that they are not as important as you would think. They are merely representations of the spirit of the people, of the Volkgeist, as Hegel would say. Yeah, and
that's a modernist take. And I have a lot of monarchist beliefs, and so I think that was actually the beginning of the decline of Western civilization. Before that, what really happened was there was like kings, right? Yeah. And they ruled for earthly reasons. And when religion became a part of European culture, it changed, and the king didn't rule for the people, right? He wasn't like how we pretend that presidents are servants of the people, but he was a servant of God, and he was basically accountable to a higher divinity for the safekeeping. So it was more like a trust, like having a trust.
Exactly.
And that people don't get why that's important, but I think the reason that it's important is because society can't be ruled with values that are bottom up. And that's what it does when you say like you're a servant of the people. The king is above the people and is a servant of God that manages the kingdom with that kind of responsibility, and everything works from the top down, as I think was originally meant, and the greatest periods of Europe were thought that way. But before we got to like this whole liberal democracy thing, it was those ideas that started to take hold. Oh, the king is a servant of the people and has to serve for the people. And so ultimately, I mean, I know that's threatening to a lot of people, because the reason that they're in this is because they're poor and they don't want to be, you know, oppressed or anything like that. But the reality is people were much happier when kings ruled that way and when the system was built that way. It's now under this current system, with the pretense that the world can be ruled from the bottom up, that people are suffering so terribly.
Yeah, in a way I do agree, but in a way again I am against that, because people, the ones that should be leaders, actually know what they are up against and what can happen to them, because that's what happened to Rockwell, to Malcolm X, to Abraham Lincoln, to whatever, you know, anyone that wants to take arms against these.
Well, Abraham Lincoln deserved his bullet. I'll say that.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
right on
and,
the other two.
Yeah, he's a
yeah,
tyrant.
yeah. In a way, yes. But he also
But I
tried.
agree. I agree with your
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
I'm sorry that I'm really nitpicky, but
yeah. No, no, no,
you're
no.
right.
No, it's okay, because what I pick up from different, because for example for me, uh, and I'm going to be really unpopular with this opinion, but yeah, for me, is Iron Guard is as valuable as Nicolae Ceausescu's government, because they do both were different expressions and the different frameworks of the will of their people in and up to a certain extent, not more than that, because you also gotta be objective with that, because of the framework they were using. You know, once were using uh, uh, fascism, but and the other one were using communism. So there are going to be things that are not really applicable in both cases. But despite that, I do like their attempt, the different
Yeah.
views on that. But I like both. The same goes with Tito, for example, or with Juche or Tomas Sankara in Upper Volta,
Yeah.
Nasser,
But
and all these people. Hmm. But that's my take. You know.
so yeah. So let me. I'm not gonna. This isn't like too long. It's like a short paragraph. I'm gonna try to read it as quickly as I can. But it's generally like why. And this is from Mein Kampf, and this is why I believe in pure leadership. In this world is not the creative act of the genius always a protest against the inertia of the mass. What shall the statesman do if he does not succeed in coaxing the parliamentary multitude to give its consent to his policy? Shall he purchase that consent for some sort of consideration? Or when confronted with the obstinate stupidity of his fellow citizens, should he then refrain from pushing forward the measures which he deems to be a vital necessity to the life of the nation? And that's like really key. Is great men are great because they have a higher understanding and a willingness to act and things like that. And those men see the problem and the solution and the actions differently. And so if you have a system where that leader is forced to convince people constantly, convince people who are inferior to go along or to see things his way, you're going to run into problems constantly, endlessly, and you're going to run into problems at the worst times, at times when you need clear and direct action. And I've experienced those problems in organizing myself when I've taken this more like let's listen to what everybody thinks and let's try to like agree together. Like it's always been worse. And whenever I've stood out, like whenever I've succeeded in a large way, it's when I've doubled down and I've actively gone against the majority of opinions. The majority of people didn't think I should double down on the after Charlottesville when we had that event. A lot of people who were supporters of mine told me not to do it and that maybe it shouldn't happen because of the Charlottesville and all this stuff that happened. But I was convinced that it was the right thing to do, and for reasons, not just feelings. And when we carried it out, it was very successful. We had thousands of people protest us, so it brought us all this news and it gave me the ability to say my message. But no one was arrested. The only person that was arrested was actually a leftist that punched a black guy who was on our side. And so it worked out very well for us. And that was probably the most controversial thing I did that the most people opposed. And that's how it's always going to be. And so in order for a people to be great, they must be led by a great man. But that great man must also be empowered to do great things when the people under him don't understand. And that's a big thing.
The will.
Go.
Oh, that's all I was gonna say. He has to have the will in order to make decisions on the fly and execute without appealing to the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Not even a majority. I
yeah,
mean, like, even a small council. Like, for example, the way that National Socialism was in Germany, the way that it was written in Mein Kampf, there's always like a council,
yeah,
but that council isn't like Hitler's not accountable to them. They're accountable to Hitler, and they give Hitler information for him to make decisions, but
yeah.
he's not accountable to them at the end of the day, and that's what I
Mm-hmm.
think should happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I agree. I actually agree with that. I'm not saying that it should be like a democracy. You are misunderstanding me, because I am taking as well once again the example of the how the Ayatollah works, and this is the there is a small council of 12 people and the leader. Of course, the leader is going to take the decisions, but it's going to listen to all of their advisors. No, and they will make different arguments, and because the leader is the wisest one above them all, he's ultimately going to make the decision on what path he should follow. Hmm. that's
Yeah.
that's what I am saying.
Yeah, I also like Japan's a really good country to look at, specifically the Empire of Japan. They pretty much overthrew their democracy that they had and reinstalled the monarchy, and they have a council of elders, of leaders in the background that would overlook in case Japan goes into a wrong direction. They'll be able to steer it back. I'm not really as well read about it. I know there's one guy calls in the cat room all the time and talks about it, but I just don't think it's. We couldn't have something too similar because we don't have like a aristocracy, like a couple of knights that'll like overthrow the democracy and restore a king. But it's kind of interesting to look at.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, definitely. I think there needs to be some sort of hierarchy within any kind of ascension to leadership in order for it to truly function correctly. I mean, yeah, you've got your figurehead, your leader, your Hitler, your Trump, your Pope, right? But then you've got your cardinals beneath that. You've got your your council, your cabinet, right?
Your inquisitors.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Whatever the name
one
you-
thing that I would point out about all that, right, is the Pope is elected by cardinals, and
Yeah.
the way that works is that's still like a bureaucratic system, right?
Hmm.
And one person that actually outlined this, because Hitler didn't address it, but that question that you just said, what do? We don't have an aristocracy, and we don't have kings, and we don't have a history of kings in the United States. So what do you do? And Coach Renew said that the elite is chosen by the old elite, right? When a king is on his way out, he should choose. It shouldn't necessarily be hereditary, but he should choose who is going to replace him, because if he's the great man that's been making all the decisions, only he can really be the best judge of who would best fulfill that role.
Hmm.
And so what do you do if you don't have one? Is that has to go through the natural process. Kings weren't born kings. At first there were warlords, and all of that developed and grew up until those people became kings and their empires. And so with our movement that doesn't have a monarchy to reinstate or anything like that, it's basically going to have to take the natural process. And that's just who's going to be able to form a leader, who's going to be able to get people behind them, who's going to be able to build that. And so that's the way. But the whole thing about the Pope is he's elected by cardinals, and that system has become more and more bureaucratic, and that's actually why we have such a fucking shitty Pope right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. By the way, yeah, I agree with that, but also I will tie that with the main idea of fascism, that is made by action and by example. There are people that are going to do much more, are going to be more appealing. They are going to have better ideas and all that stuff. And the one that is the leader at the moment should see who's, and everyone that is all of the council members should see who's actually that person. And again, they are not eating for the power itself, but they are in it for the people and for the mission and for the thrill of the fight, as the fascists would always say. And I would add what Primo de Rivera said. They're in it for the dance with the dead, with death itself. They are in it because they want long live death. Que viva la muerte. That's what Primo used to say.
The other thing that I would point out too that I think you're very right is if you look at Hitler during those 12 years before he took power lived in like super humble circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one thing that people should be looking out for is are we choosing leaders who make themselves comfortable with the limited funds that they're receiving as leaders right away? And that's like really something to consider. And I'm not like trying to brag or anything, but I want to point out, like, I was watching people in the movement get money and then start using that to pay their bills. And when I was organizing as what I consider to be like an actually devoted leader, I received $700, I think, total over the course of a year. And I expended like $10,000. And that's something that people should look at, because you're very right. Is the leader leading? Is his main thing to lead? Or is he using leadership as a way to attain the material wealth that he wants to, or the status, or access to women, which is a very big thing that I've seen people like try to rise up in this movement to do. And that's something that I think that people need to be aware of. That's a big deal, because it's obvious. I mean, I would post receipts of things. I was so embarrassed by the possibility that anybody could think that I was using donations to benefit myself, that I actually posted like my credit card statement. And I was able to do that because everything was like basically expenditures. I was able to show the whole statement because all I had used my credit card for was expenditures for materials for the movement, right? And that's one thing, because I would hate to see, again, the elevation of merchants and of people that have self-interest in mind. And I think that it was good for you to bring that up.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Who else want to bring another point to that?
Well, actually, this is more dovetailing with what's going on contemporarily now. So you have Identity Europa is led by this conglomerate, I suppose, that's almost like a corporate structure. Vice Patriot Front, which is Thomas Rousseau, who's the leader. And there isn't necessarily like a fully fleshed out hierarchy, although there are like state sort of leaders. And he's I don't know how IE does their funding, but Patriot Front, essentially everything is done out of pocket. There's no external funding whatsoever. And if there is, we would end up using that anyway for further projects, because there's always something that we need to get. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, Patriot Front is good. I'm sorry, I heard what you were saying.
Yeah, definitely. They are. They're people. I think it makes a case for itself once you even look past like just even surface level things. I think a lot of people will bag on our leader being only like 20 years old, but it's like if you ever like converse with him or work with him, he's a very sharp person, and he's actually that kind of leadership pretty rare, I would say.
Mm-hmm. For example,
here's what I would say. I don't want to like counter signal. For one, like let me like for one get it out of the way. Patriot Front is obviously the only nationalist movement. I don't consider Identity Europa a nationalist movement at all. But I would consider, right, like I don't want to counter signal the leader because I don't know that much about him. But there's like hard rules, right? There's things that I think are important that I've learned from my legionaries organizationally, and I do think that even like a really wise 20-year-old is simply not prepared for that. So, one of the things that Heel Turn just did is Joaquim, who is more of a personality, handed the show over to Richard Spencer. And I think that ultimately, someone with more experience should probably be given that role within the organization. Because 20 is super young, and that is something that Hitler did say, and that's not a flaw, right? And I'm not like supporting or counter signaling because I really don't know. I've seen like a handful of videos, and I like the way he spoke, and I like the way the video is, and I like the aesthetics, and I like most of what I've seen from Patriot Front, pretty much everything. But that would concern me, is like 20 years old is really long for leadership, and when they start coming down on Patriot Front, that might start to show. And that's not a flaw against him. It's just 20 years old is super young.
Yeah, but I got a counter signal that telling that, for example, my leader, when he started, he was 24. Right now he's 29, and he has been the best leader I have ever seen. There are people that do have that ability. That's super rare. It's surely super rare, but it could happen. the very same thing did happen with the Bolivian movement. It was called what was it? Socialist Bolivian Phalange, fastball, fastball. But yeah, they also had a really young leader, and they did rise to power. So it's really uncommon, but it can happen. That's my opinion.
I think there's also a lot of fellowship within this group, at least. We have like a fair amount of like standards and practices that we actually implement and stick to. There's a big one: no women, and it's not like a offensive matter or anything like that. It's just at this time there's no reason to include women in the organization whatsoever. And we actually had a local beef with a bunch of guys in our state. Trying to shore up more membership, and it kind of came down to that, where a lot of the guys were like, well, we're part of this other group. They had a local named group, and they allowed women, and it was very obviously like what you were saying, they just wanted access to women. And it's I'm married.
Here's the number one thing I'll say about that too. Like, and it's funny because like whenever people say these things, it's always Mein Kampf that comes to my mind that I'm thinking about. That's like, yeah, this is why this is a problem. Your organization, like people that are in it, have to have a religious faith in that organization. And I'm like being hyperbolic, but really, it's important that like if you're in Patriot Front is your organization. You see Patriot Front as the only vehicle for the salvation of your people, and you're fully committed and dedicated to it. You can't be in love with your wife and married to your wife and be a good husband and then also have a girlfriend on the side, right? And so one of the things that Hitler was very specific about was that kind of loyalty. If you don't have people that are loyal to your movement, then you shouldn't geographically expand to other places. Like if I'm in Los Angeles and someone in another state wants to perpetuate my movement that I'm building, but I don't trust that person for leadership and loyalty reasons, then I really can't. Like it's better for you not to expand yet than it would be for you to open that up. And so already you have that problem that you just kind of spoke about. And so what that tells me is that you guys are expanding kind of in this way. And there's a lot of people probably that are part of Patriot Front that are part of other groups or have these divided loyalties. And that's a huge issue. And so like I like Patriot Front. I actually like even sent them an application and everything. But from this literature that I've read that I consider to be biblical in importance to our movement, there's a lot of violating of rules that I think are fundamentally important. And that are not bendable.
Yeah.
And
also,
and I don't want to see you guys fail, by the way.
Yeah.
But I just see potential danger there.
Yeah. I will also tie that up with another book by Codriano, which is Manual of the Leader. I don't know if you have had access to that.
The Left Leader's Manual, I believe it's called.
Leader's Manual. Yeah, that one. And he explains basically how this initiative works. There could be a cell within a town, within a city, but again, it's based on merit. It's based on action, and Patriot Front can actually learn from that. Yes, in a state, if you actually find a person and a person is already doing stuff and they want to join, perhaps it's good to take a second look on that. But then, if they stagnate at some point and they are not moving, they are not moving things forward, you should start disconnecting the cell, and just advise that they should move to another state to gain more knowledge, more insight on how you can do other things with another more successful cell, and then go back, and they start implementing other things that you just learned. That's what I have to add.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned so far with Mein Kampf, and I think this would apply to Patriot Front, is Hitler talks a lot about the importance of having our own propaganda and our own slogans and stuff like that. And I think that's one thing, as bad as Trump might be, that he got right. He was able to convince the most whites ever to go vote for him, and it was all simple slogans, build the wall, lock her up, things like that. We need that kind of a thing, something that's very basic and that can get across. Yeah, exactly. We need to.
It's okay to be white.
Real life group.
We have a couple of those. It's okay to be white is one. You're right.
Yeah.
Strong borders, strong nations.
Well, and you know that's and now that I've said those things about Patriot Front, I mean Patriot Front has very good potential. Everything that they do is very aesthetic, and the way that it looks is good, and it appeals. It does that thing that people were talking about where they're trying to promote American nationalism. And here's the one thing that I actually didn't like about Identity Europa right off the bat is that they're very nebulous. They're not fascist, and Patriot Front was very openly like fascism is how we win and how we save our people, and so it's explicitly that. But it does that in a way that still feels very American with the color schemes and those things. So I think Patriot Front, it might do a great job of memeing itself into success and using those things. But I don't know, does Patriot Front have like a motto that goes along with that imagery, like an official motto or anything like that?
Most of the motto, it's reclaim America, strong borders, strong nations, strong family, strong nations. There's probably some that I'm not remembering, but usually you have a script or a couple of words that, you know, if you're doing demos. They actually just completed one. I wasn't part of it, but they went. A bunch of guys went to DC and demonstrated, and it was a great little thing. I think there was at least like 70 guys or PF members there. They just released a video of it finally, I think today.
Yeah,
it is essentially it is essentially a very you know, dictatorial kind of hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
Loki,
because I want to see Patriot Front succeed. I mean, they're the only organization that exists.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, it was the only organization that I had any in, because I had been. I mean, I hate to say it, but shopping around because I was like, you know, I really want to get more involved. You know, in actual activism, and it was like at the time, this was over the summer. It was like, who's out there? Oh, Identity Europa, and I was like, are they even like straight? I mean, I don't want to be rude to. They had an upside down.
Do I have to suck a dick as part of saving?
Yeah, well, they had an upside down triangle. It was like nebulous. Yeah, well, it was the.
I've had people from Identity Europa come to my events, and I don't want to tarnish them because they're good people. But that organization, I think, is just like college Republicans, and
yeah,
and
well,
I really like. And I waited a long time.
Are you saying this just because they had James also as one of their leaders?
No, I like.
I actually
James,
didn't know that. Yeah. I didn't. I like James.
Is James also one of their leaders?
Yeah, he was in this event. I think he was like, I forgot his position, but it's a pretty high up position.
I just don't know what Identity Europa is even fighting for.
Nothing
exactly.
For donations.
They
seems like
they
to me.
I actually understand what their position is. They are basically trying to imitate or copy what Generation Identity in Europe are doing. They are basically doing that. They are fighting.
Generation Identity is a terrible movement.
Yeah,
in a way, but not exactly. You know, I do have to.
You don't think so?
Because it's more metapolitical than political. You know, there are two aspects, and I already covered that. And I said, you know, we don't need well, in my country we do have those. We have two movements that are very the same, are connected. They are both our movements, which is the intellectual one with our Center of Studies that they do something similar, and the actual state. If you have those two connected, you already won the battle. There is nothing. There is nothing. It just needs time.
From what I've looked into Generation Identity, I really think it's like a money-making venture, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And like Tommy Robinson, they have a lot of resources. They have fucking helicopters for one fucking event. Like they're doing some pretty big things and all that money. And I looked into that, and that's pretty like kosher. Their movement is like pretty kosher, and that it's like Tommy Robinson kosher, where like he says some things and people think he's cool, and they've never bothered to look into the fact that he's like pro-Israel and he's pro like liberalism and multiculturalism, and he just happens to be co-opting this anti-Muslim feeling and preventing someone else from rising up who is our guy and doing his thing. So I gave them a fair shot, but I genuinely don't think that Generation Identity is a legitimate movement. I think that's a co-opted movement, to be honest with you. And I don't say that about everybody, but I just have to say what I believe in and what I don't. And I really
exactly.
Generation Identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's what I am seeing Identity Europa doing. I mean, they both have identity in their names.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have to head out pretty soon, but I'll say this about, before I get to like shit talky, but generally what, and this has been like just an across the board, like the way Patriot Front has talked about Identity Europa is, we like a lot of the members are good folks.
Yeah.
We hope they'll come over to our side whenever, but their leadership is very, as you said, nebulous, and it's like, what do you actually, what's your stated goals? What do you look, and it's not made apparent. So we just don't see them as, they probably by the numbers, they're probably, because I know a lot of Patriot Front members are actually former Identity Europa members, and they're not anymore. And their main reason for leaving that was simply, well, we did a bunch of stuff, but there wasn't this kind of like much more granular activism where you just had people going, picking up trash, going to local events, talking to people outside. We'll call it, I know we're not liking to call it movement, but basically people that might be able to be co-opted or at least made to understand things, because a lot of this information, at least as I now understand it, it's just not. It's not out
and what
there.
you're saying is Patriot Front was doing those things, and IE wasn't doing those things.
What's that?
Are you saying that Patriot Front was doing those things, and IE isn't doing those things? And that's why
not nearly as much. They do stickering, they do flyering. I mean, we do too, but it's not made as apparent, and they have to be sanctioned events and this kind of. It almost sounds like there's a corporate process to it. Sure, yeah, certainly, but not to the level
in high. Well, I don't know. I don't know specifically what you're talking about, so I don't want to counter.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if I'm being like 100% correct on that, but because I've never been part of IE, and I just know like what other people have said about it and kind of like what former members have spoken about. Again, we'll see everything play out and see what happens.
Yeah.
What about like League of the South or Northwest Front? Is there any collaboration going on? Like, is that something that we could do?
League of the South, any Southern identity stuff does not mix well with other movements. They are very, very focused on a Southern identity.
Well, I'll say this: like, nobody should mix. Like that's not something that people should do. Like, you shouldn't be working with other groups. That just sets the ground for conflict later between two different groups.
That's been my contention, but
the problem is we have these regional differences, and we're going to have to resolve them and fight for a common cause at some point.
Well, that's
then
not
people. Then you're going to have to get those people to join Patriot Front, or people from Patriot Front are going to have to join that movement. But when two movements work together, all that ends up happening is massive conflict that turns into like this almost internecine conflict, and again from Mein Kampf, like you're really not supposed to do that, and that's one of those hard rules. Like, if you think Patriot Front is doing good things, and you need to join Patriot Front, and Patriot Front needs to do things, and Patriot Front eventually needs to try to expand or have influence in an area, but it shouldn't do that by forming a cooperation with a different and competing group, and that's like a huge thing. That's a big thing I believe in.
No, actually,
there's a lot of people in the South that also blame Yankees for a lot of the problems of the country.
Yeah. You got to remember. You got to remember that.
And I like League of the South, by the way. Like, this isn't a League of the South thing in general.
Like,
it's a principle thing.
And I'm based in the South. So is my co-host, and we're both syndicated by Identity Dixie. Let me tell you right now, the last people on this continent that took arms against the federal government were Southerners. You're not going to shake that identity from them. You're not going to shake that history from them. Southern identitarians, they're their own thing. They don't give a shit about what Patriot Front or what IE is doing. They care about Southern nationalism.
Yeah. By the way,
and that might be a different movement entirely. So you see why like cooperation there would be negative.
Yeah, there was kind of I'm not going to get into it, but yeah.
Here, let me this is like really big. This is just a paragraph from Mein Kampf. All those movements which owe their expansion to a so-called combination of similar organisms, which mean that their external strength is due to a policy of compromise, are like plants whose growth is forced in a hothouse. They shoot up externally, but they lack that inner strength which enables the natural plant to grow into a tree that will withstand the storm of centuries. And that kind of thing, like you really do see that. You see like these different organizations work together, and it looks like they're really big because they have these really big events, and then they just like fall apart and like just absolute bullshit later. And that's because even if you agree on everything, but you don't agree on who's the leader of the movement, like two organizations obviously do because they have two different leaderships, like that is enough room for conflict and for destruction and for negativity. And so, like, as far as that, the idea that any group should work together, I think that they shouldn't. I think you should be devoted to your cause and your organization and doing everything you can if you believe that that is the right organization to propel it to supremacy, rather than trying to do this working together thing where it just never works out. It's always been bad for everybody.
100%. That's why Unite the Right was a failure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with the failure and all that stuff. But you are forgetting something, that your country is 3 times what Germany was. That's the main problem, and that's why you actually need movement in the south and movement in the north. You know, to maybe break away
Well,
the power.
Here's the thing that happened even in Germany. I mean, there were a lot of little groups, and a lot of these groups decided, well, you know what, like the NSDAP, like it's just bigger, the leadership is strong, and they blended into it, and they accepted the leadership, and they became a part of it. And that's how it should happen. If I have like a group of 10 guys and we're doing things, and Patriot Front is huge, and you know what, I think that the leader is a good leader to lead, and I can pledge my allegiance to him, and I think that their mission statement is righteous, and then I join Patriot Front with my men.
Yeah.
And that's like what and that can't happen.
Suborn to the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what happens if my 10 men and Patriot Front work together? Then what we're saying is like, yeah, we have this problem, but I don't trust you to be leader and you don't trust me to be leader. And so off the bat, there's always a hidden antagonism that you can cover up, but that you can never make disappear. Because if it did disappear, then somebody would fall in line. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I'm not saying that one is worse than the other, because I like League of the South. I like Hunter Wallace a lot. I think his writing is great, and I think he's very smart. But I think that, I mean, and the reason I say, and I quote Mein Kampf, and I went out of my way to read the paragraph, is because people will call me a shill and divisive for expressing that, but that's not me. That's like Hitler. I didn't come up with that at all. That's just me following Hitler's example.
Yeah, but by quoting Dugin, you know, the third political ideology did die because it was crushed, because it lacked the vision, and that's the main problem with Hitler and the movement. You know, they were good inward, yeah, that's correct. Outward, they didn't know what they were doing, and that's the reason why they failed and they were crushed. And it's a sad thing to say, but that's how things play out, because they were so focused, and maybe Britain someday are going to understand, no, they should have started to look at other allies, and they did that, but in later in the game, when it was already too late.
I mean, the thing about that is when people talk about like these deep reasons why Hitler lost, like they're not looking at it like Hitler didn't lose, I don't think, for ideological reasons. He lost because Germany is a small country that had just lost a serious war, and Russia and the United States were like powerhouses with massive populations and resources. And so, I mean, they're like, ideology is not going to save you, right? Like, you might have like in a fight, like, you know how they say that if you have good technique, like you can beat someone larger than you, and that's mostly true. But if someone's like 150 pounds and they try to take me on at like 230 pounds of raw muscle, like it's not really going to matter that much. And that's really what I consider to be the case in World War II. I don't think it was an ideology thing, because I don't think communism or liberal democracy are better ideologies than National Socialism. It's just a fact of raw power. And even the strength of a good ideology isn't going to overcome a certain amount of just raw fucking power, which was the massive size and resources of those two superpowers versus a very small Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the problem was that the communism and capitalism allied together against nationalism. That's the same thing that we're seeing now. We're seeing the capitalists on Wall Street and the communists Antifa in the street allied against us.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of size and power is what I mean to say, you know what I mean? Like Antifa, like, you know, Antifa is usually made up of really weak, shitty men. But if there's only 2 of us and there's actually like 75 of them, the fact that I train really hard and I'm disciplined and that I'm generally strong, like there's only a certain amount that can do, and I think that was what happened really in World War II, in my opinion. And you're right about your assessment on capitalism and communism working together, because they're both ultimately Jewish philosophies that don't serve Western peoples. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, what I was wanted to, what I was getting at, it was yeah, they were starting to support Kuomintang in China. They supported Japan, and they started to support the Indian Legion, the Arab Legion, and all that stuff. But that was really late in the game. If they would have understood that first, that would have changed the game. And also, they forgot about North America. They forgot about South America and everyone. If they would have come to understood that we also had movements back in the 30s in Chile, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay. Everyone had a movement, a fascist or anti-communist movement. If they would have understood that, perhaps the outcome of the war would have been a different day. And but that's my personal opinion. By knowing all this stuff, maybe.
well, one thing in agreement, actually, I want to agree with you. I'm reading about McCarthy right now, and one thing that's really clear: people don't realize how deeply penetrated communism was in the United States, and how deep the Jews were in our country. And so, I mean, you're right. One of the things is, if we were full to the brim with communists who were motivating us to operate in a certain way and to do a certain thing. Japan was actually influenced. They had people in high places that they weren't necessarily going to come after the United States in Pearl Harbor. They were also looking at Russia as a target, and everything kind of worked out a certain way. And a lot of that was because of the communist infiltration. So communism's inherent globalism and the penetration that they had of the United States and Japan and a lot of the actors at that time, I think, was a very big part of why they won, obviously. And so that was big. You're right. I mean, National Socialism was focused on Germany, but that's not really like an asset. I mean, in a way, that's just the treacherousness of communism, and that should have been rooted out. But you're right. You're right that they did. I mean, Germany didn't have as many allies, and the war worked out in a certain way, specifically because of communism's infiltration of other governments.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, we cannot blame them completely, because they didn't have the technologies that we do right now, and that's the main advantage that we have over them. The only
What do you mean?
Because they would.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to sign off. By the way, I got another stream to do.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, man. Good luck with Patriot Front, man.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, we'll see you guys all out there.
Okay,
y'all have a good one.
Yeah,
right, keep
I
doing
do
good stuff.
apologize. I've also got to jump off.
Oh, no worries.
All right, have a good one, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one. Bye.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Gracias. Adios.
Adios.
So I want to take back what I said earlier about America's problem probably being the diversity of races, when I think it's actually might be regionalism. You know, the South has a much different culture from the Northeast and the West Coast. Texas itself has like almost a different culture from the rest of the South, and there's a lot of schism between that. You can kind of see that in the movement with the League of the South not really cooperating with the other groups in the alt-right and so forth and so on.
I can see
Well,
that.
probably be better off just splitting like different regions.
To be fair, the League of the South was trying to cooperate with like TWP and other things when that was going on. I think the reason that League of the South is really doing their own thing right now is like Hunter Wallace is pretty pissed off about the optics debate. And the optics debate was really fucking gay because it was a bunch of people like England attacking the TWP and attacking the League of the South for their optics. And you know, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think our men should definitely work out and be presentable and things like that. But the way that it was carried out with people calling our activists white trash and shit like that, that is a big reason why the League of the South is no longer cooperating. And it's hard for me to blame them when they're out there doing these things and people who aren't doing those things are calling them white trash. So it's, and I do believe that you're right, regional differences and especially Southern identity is very strong. But a lot of it is also that. So I think it's a case of two things.
Yeah, I think we have regional differences, but one good thing is Patriot Front is in like 40 states now, so I don't think they're regionally based. So if there was a group I would join, that would probably be it as well.
Yeah, you would have to. Patriot Front is like the only nationalist movement. But I would see that expansion to me is worrisome, because that is a really rapid expansion. That's a huge expansion without like the groundwork being laid down. And so for me, it's like the leadership being very young is a concern, because of what I noted, and I know that you disagree with me, but then also like that expansion is, how did you ensure that all of these different state leaders are actually loyal in who they are? Because Patriot Front hasn't been around for that long. That is a huge expansion.
Oh, I agree about the leadership thing. I think that's way too young as well. I know Hitler said you should be at least 30, and if you are compromised in any way, you should immediately step down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, a few years ago, I was a Marxist. I'm 30 right now. So his advice in my case is exactly right. Is if I had gained some kind of prominence, that would have been, and I was, because I was in Occupy and I did some things. But he's exactly right. I didn't fully come around to seeing things this way for a very long time, and it was 30. It was literally at about 28, 29 where these things started to happen. And so, like, what I've seen in the past is a lot of people that were like our guys, and then when they got older, they just like cucked out, and they're like, and that's who, like, you see the Vice articles about, where they're like, oh, how this skinhead gave up hate. And it's usually someone that was really outspoken when they were like 20 and 23 or 24, and then when they're 30, they just dropped out. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things. But the loyalty issue is, how do you assure that you have that loyalty of 40 state leaders in a movement that's grown this fast, would be my concern.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a good thing that show by Kristen Picciolini on MSNBC got canceled pretty quick. I guess they couldn't find enough stereotypical skinheads to make them leave the movement.
Well, he was also Jewish too, so there's that angle.
Oh, there was a Jewish skinhead in that episode?
There was one where some guy who was like a Ku Klux Klan guy, I think it was, and he ended up like quitting the movement and admitting that he was both Jewish and gay. And I was just like, Jesus fucking, oh my God, Yeah. And so I don't think it was a case of him being young, though. I think he's just a fucking weirdo and made us look terrible. But
yeah, I think the thing with Patriot Front, from what I've heard, is it's mostly older guys, and they want a fresh face to put at the center.
Perhaps.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's good, but it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to assume negative things, because I don't want to try to poison the well against an organization that I view as like being good and doing good things.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just like hard rules. Like that was one of the things that like concerned me, and like that's why like I want to just join an organization. I don't want to have to build anything from the ground up. But I haven't seen any group that's actually committed to the tenets of National Socialism as outlined by Adolf Hitler or Kodronu. Like, people are kind of making things up as they go along, and I really don't like that. I feel like there's a kind of arrogance that goes with throwing out what these leaders wrote, who are greater men than any of us. Like, none of us have done anything remotely similar to what Kodronu or Mosley or any of these men have done. And so when people start building organizations where they're breaking the rules written by these men, it makes me hesitate,
No, I actually have to counter-signal that, because that was Germany in the 30s. We are now living in the 2000s, much more than that. And, my country is, of course, not Germany. That's why initially we did pick National Socialism, didn't work. Then we picked up fascism, didn't work. And now we decided to create something of our own that is much more appealing. It's because it came from us to our own being on time, by quoting Heidegger, to our own Dasein. And that's.
But you're quoting somebody who's older than Hitler, mm-hmm. as like the ideology. You know what I mean? Like here's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, like what I'm thinking of is like Europeans, mm-hmm. and people don't really change. Technology changes, but technology doesn't change the fundamental values and tenets and rules of social dynamics. Mm-hmm. And so the rules that Hitler wrote down, they don't have to do with like technology. They have to do with
no.
Human relationships.
No, you misunderstood that. I was saying, they didn't have the technology to know what was happening in South America, for example. They didn't know that we had fascist parties and national socialist. Yeah, Chile had a national socialist party, for example. They didn't know that.
Sure.
They wouldn't know. That's what I was saying. No, 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 not something.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, but no. What I am saying is that by quoting Guillaume Faye, that lived until he was until the 90s, I believe, he said that the next movements should actually, in a way, do the what National Socialism did. What that was bring back together all the traditions and all that stuff, but onto the present in order to create an alternative future. That's what needs to happen. But that own expression is different for each country, for each society, for each civilization, and that's what, for example, Juan Domingo Perón did. He didn't do national socialism. He didn't do fascism. He did his own thing. That's what I was getting at. The same with Leon the Great, the same with Codriano, the same with many others. They had their own expression of their own people at that specifically time and era. That's what I am saying, because, for example, a lot of people like Rockwell, but I don't see him as a barrier to the third political theory, which would be fascism and national socialism. He did his own thing, but was mostly reactionary, in my opinion. But that's my take.
No, you're right about Rockwell. I agree with that assessment of Rockwell. And I like Rockwell for a lot of reasons as well too. But he was a reactionary mostly. Yeah. Um, I agree with what you're saying. Fascism and the third position, like that, it does have to kind of take the shape and the identity of the people that apply it. It's not like a materialist philosophy that everybody can just do the same way. But what I'm saying is, in my incompetent for my legionaries, is that there are rules that I think are universal rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like when you're building an airplane, carrier planes and jets and things are built in different ways for different reasons. But there's always fundamental laws of dynamics, of aerodynamics and things that apply to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of that is what I'm talking about with like the 30-year rule and like, for example, we have technology right now, but one of the things in my conflict is about how you should start. There should be a center, and I think for them it was Munich, and there's a reason that everything operates in that center, and that's the way that it works. And with technology, some people feel like, oh, we don't have to do that because we can speak to people over these, with this technology in different places, but using and relying on all that technology makes all of our planning and all of our everything that we talk about open to digital interference from state actors who are trying to prevent us from achieving our goals. And so these things that seem like, oh, we don't have to worry about these because they're from like 1930s Germany, I think that they actually still apply because the technology serves the interest of the status quo more than it serves our interests because we have less access to weaponize it against them than they do to us.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree with part of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, yeah, to get a little bit further with what you are saying. For example, Hezbollah did that in order to beat the IDF. They did had their own communication system, but it wasn't based on technology. For example, it was based on letters and documents and all that stuff. But that itself was codified. So IDF never understood what they said, despite they have a 150 IQ, whatever. They didn't understood what was being said in the letters, and that's why Hezbollah won.
Yeah, but
By the way,
I don't know too much about Middle East movements.
Loki.
Yeah, his goal is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Was able to hold Israel off, even with Egypt and that was the other country. Syria couldn't even do that.
Mm-hmm. Loki, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that, yeah, I think technology has really holds us back in a lot of ways because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to go on the internet and vent. We wouldn't have Trump's Twitter where he gives people the dopamine rush, but then never actually ends up doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we really need to find a way to get people to be more social.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree so completely with that. That's a really great point. At what point does this technology turn into a tool for us to wake people up? And at what point does it turn into a safety shelter for people to hide in and to stop people from doing what needs to be done? And I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's one of the reasons why we're not censored off the internet completely is they want us to have that area to vent or whatever, so we don't actually end up doing anything.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I'm actually totally for destroying those VR headsets that they're coming out with and the interactive toys that they get with the VR headsets. I think that's going to be very destructive towards society.
By the way, something else I gotta pop up is that there are two times that yeah, in the present we are talking in two times. We are talking in synchronous time and asynchronous time. Within synchronous time, I mean what the conversation we are having right now. We all are interacting right now. But in asynchronous time, we are also talking for the people that in the future will listen to the podcast. And that's I always try to play with both because I work with technologies and all that stuff, so it's easier for me to do this. But it's always yeah, people should understand that technology can work in that way. It's not just people engaging right now, but in the people that are going to engage. What message are we going to give them? What tips? What ideas? What questions for them to ask to solve for themselves?
Lifting and reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seriously.
Mhm.
And people don't get why lifting is important, but I like the 1,000 pound club goal. And it's not because if you can lift 500 pounds that you're a good person or a good nationalist, but if you don't have the discipline to be able to do that, you're not going to have the discipline that it takes to engage in struggle. And so lifting weights is a really good way to measure it because like 200 pounds is 200 pounds. If you can lift that next week, if you can't, if you're making progress, if you're achieving your goals. And what's funny is like I've seen a lot of people try it that say like, I have a strong will and willpower and all this, but they give up on it. And so for me, I mean, you could do it a number of ways, but I think lifting is the best way to cultivate will and to see and to be able to measure it. And I just think it's good for aesthetic purposes too. Look, if there was like five of us and we had like something of a uniform and we were all like pretty big, like people would wonder who we were and we would have a positive connotation from the start. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would like to see more of that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you guys lift?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
But as a millennial, I definitely see that we have a big testosterone problem, and that's one way to help with that. We have too many people that aren't afraid of taking a risk, and that's not the way that we should be living.
Yeah.
What do you think about
Again,
advocating that all of our guys are in the 1,000 pound club? What do you guys think about that? Do you guys lift?
In a what?
The 1,000 pound club, so like powerlifting with like a deadlift, bench, and squat.
Uh,
I think that's very good. And also, our guys should take boxing too, because they need to get used to being hit.
mhm.
Being able to lift 1,000 pounds, used to taking a few hits. It's very important.
Yeah. By the way, I don't lift, but I do savate, which is French boxing, basically French kickboxing. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's good too. I think sparring is good for cultivating like the willingness to get hit and to strike. But um, I've seen like with the MMA training, for one, if like your club starts as a fight club, like you're gonna attract a lot of heat really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But two, it's not like I've trained for MMA. Like I went through a period of my life where I trained for like 5 years. A lot of people I trained with were fat. You know what I mean? I actually think like lifting takes more discipline than MMA training.
Ah, yeah,
And I think
definitely,
so I would say that.
yeah, but
But it is good. That's
mhm,
interesting. Kickboxing is definitely what I would recommend, though. But
mhm.
that's good that you do that for like as far as martial arts. I think that's a good one.
Uh-huh. Yeah, definitely, and that's mainly. Yeah, I also know a little bit of knife fighting because I did train a little bit of what was it, Sistema, which is the self defense system from Russia. I do know a little bit of things here and there because of that, and because of the wild nature of my society. It's useful. It's useful. I actually know. Yeah, I learned a little bit of that. But anyways, Rafael, I believe we are in 2 hours, have been 2 hours long. So do you wanna add something else to the conversation, or just decide to.
Yeah, it should be about time we start wrapping up. I just wanted to. I put an article in the side chat. 1 out of 3 adults in America are pre-diabetic. So that says a lot about our need to be able to find an exercise out there, because this is really pathetic. I want to thank everybody for joining the show, especially Johnny Benitez, Loki, Evola. You guys are always welcome onto the show, The Minority Report. You can even come on my show. This hour is 56 minutes. That would be nice, too.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have anything you guys want to plug?
No, I'm not really doing anything right now, but thank you guys for having me on the show. If I have time, I typically have free time, just let me know and shoot me a link, and I'll help support your shows and get on there. Thank you guys for having me on. And I had to do this on my phone, so I can't see your guys' name, but Zero. It's always good talking to you. You have a really interesting point of view. It's good to hear from people in South America. I actually have some land in Colombia that I always think about, maybe I should do the at the end of World War II and flee to and go just hide out.
Aren't you starting a show, Johnny?
I was trying to, dude, but someone wanted me to do a show. And they wanted me to do a show with them and Heimbach, but the technology is not working. I would like to start a show, but I don't have the technology, so I'm open to starting a show.
By the way, Johnny, you can ask Boomer Jones. Underwater Alex Jones. He said that he would like to help other people, putting up a show as a producer, because right now Joaquim is producing for Spencer, so he's a loose. Yeah, he's not doing anything. So you can ask him, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's a good producer.
Yeah, I know what I was chosen. I think the guy, if he has the time to do that, I definitely do that. It's like that, and then also a co-host. I think it's hard to do a show all by yourself. I really admire, I don't agree with Catwell on everything, but I admire his ability as a showman to have a show and run it by himself in the way he does. I think he's a really good guy at that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I recommend checking out his old podcast. It was literally called Some Garbage Podcast. You can see how crappy it was compared to the podcast he's doing nowadays.
Did he evolve?
Oh, big time. He got rid of his co-host. He used to have a co-host when he did the Some Garbage Podcast. He was on Free Talk Live for a convicted murderer and a pedophile. So it's a good thing he has his own show now.
I didn't know that. Thank you for those facts. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe in his case it was an improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening to him for many years, a while back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what about you, Loki? Do you want to plug in a book, for example, or a podcast or a movie, something?
Well, I have my own channel where I just put up clips and things like that. It's Third Positionist. But besides that, I would just say to everyone, get better personally first before you look outside of yourself. Like he said, 1 in 3 are pre-diabetic. We need to fix our mental and physical problems first before we can accomplish something greater than ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I will. I would say in my case, for example, I am going to have by the 15th, I'm going to have a person that will help me with the subtitles for the Spanish interviews with the other dissidents, for example, the ones from Chile, Brazil, and also Colombia. And next week I am going to.
Let me know whenever you have anyone from Colombia on.
Yeah. No, I had yesterday. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think I was listening to that. I think I commented a little bit, but I don't think I got to hear a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I did hear that. That was interesting.
Yeah, because, for example, it's like what I was saying, you gotta know who, in the future, who are the people that are doing stuff over here, and who are the people that you can ask a question or to. Because by the way, I need to add 2 things. That's one thing. Yeah, and I'm going to have a Mexican of the Nationalist Front from Mexico on Monday, of course in Spanish. But later on when the interview is up on Yeah, it's up on my channel. You can add the auto. What was it? The auto generated subtitles, and that would do the trick for now. But anyways, and the second thing is that this the Rothschild magazine called The Economist are portraying that in 2000 in next year, but 2019, they are going to be the fourth horsemen of apocalypse in Russia. They are already portraying that there is going to be a conflict with Russia, and if that happens, well, this might be my last year alive, by the way. But I am not afraid of that.
Oh,
Yeah, because I do have someone living nearby there, and if I don't go and fight to save that person, I fail as a man. That's all that I am going to say.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I thought about that if there was like a struggle in Colombia, a national struggle, or like if we had been alive during the Civil War in Spain, I'd like to think that I would have gone and
Hmm.
fought, under Franco
Hmm.
yeah, well, definitely good luck with that. If that happens. But I think that it's funny. Lenin didn't think that the revolution was going to come in his lifetime, and I think that I mean that's one of the reasons I go to the gym and I train that discipline. Is because every little bit of discipline and struggle will help us. Because we don't know where any of us might end up. Certainly in South America, the chance of you ending up in a actual right wing squad is probably more realistic than us. But it could happen in our lifetime, and anything could happen. And we should be prepared for very serious repression and for the possibility of that kind of struggle. Hopefully not, but certainly if it does, I hope that you have luck and that are able to achieve everything that you want to with that struggle.
Hmm.
So I put my email in the side chat for you, Johnny. My
I'm on my phone. I don't know if you're on Facebook or if you're on Gab or anything, but I can't see anything in side chats, and I can't see any kind of chat comments or anything like that. So or the live chat. So send me if do you have access to my inbox on anything or.
Yeah, I actually have you on Gab. I'll send you a message on Gab.
Okay, yeah, send me a message on Gab, and that'd be the best way because I can't see the side chat.
Yeah, it would be nice to have you as a co-host to cover for me. Cover for Dan Man, actually. He just had his wife had a daughter a couple of days ago. So he's taking a couple of days off, a couple of weeks off.
Well, I'm really confused. Isn't this Dan Man, isn't Dan Man a co-host on this show?
Yeah, he's a co-host on Minority Report. Alejandro, is the other co-host, and TheAngryShark, he's the Eurasian guy. He has the most Eurasians.
But he does your show too.
Yeah, and then the Minority Report's like a consolidation of work between three different podcasts. Alejandro has his Spanish language podcast. I have This Hour Has 56 Minutes with Dan Man, Anti-Communist Cuban, and then TheAngryShark has his The Lost Eurasian podcast, a Eurasian nationalist podcast.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Okay, cool, for sure. All right. Yeah, shoot me a link. I'll definitely jump on it with you.
Yeah, it's called a minority. We're all minorities in a way. Like my mom's half Dominican. I mean, my mom's Dominican. My dad's white, so my mom's like a mulatto. Dad's white. Dan is a Castizo. Alejandro is a Castizo, and TheAngryShark is a Eurasian.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Cool.
Yeah, just not sure if everybody in the chat knows that. They kind of think it's like a alt-right podcast. We're pretty sympathetic, though.
Minority Report gives it away, but maybe people don't get that. That's funny that people don't get that.
Yeah, true. They don't.
Very funny. No, it is, and I people are going to have to work that the ridiculous purity spiraling that happens when you're a subculture. That can't happen if we actually want to win. We're going to have to work with people, even if it's not integrationist. I don't think it should be integrationist. People who do have a level of racial purity should definitely want to preserve their people. It should, but the global threat is large enough that we all need to work together against that common enemy. So yeah, and this podcast is a lot of fun. I think I've been on here like 2 other times, or at least 1 other time, and I think you guys are smart guys, have a lot of good input, especially because you're different. Like zero good stuff. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really,
Oh, go ahead, Loki.
I was just gonna say I really enjoyed it as well, and I'm glad we're opening up the lines of communication internationally because we're gonna have to do that at some point, and I think it's good that we're working towards a common goal.
Yeah, to keep
Yes.
to
Solidarity.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely to get rid of our continental enemy. That's
Yep.
once that is done, we can go back at hating each other if we want. But before that, no. Before that's the mission. That's the mission. We should focus on that and get rid of them. And that's it.
All right. All right, guys.
Yep. Well, I think that's good for the episode. See you guys next Saturday. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Later.
Bye bye.